Hello there, Hebrew fans. We are coming near the end of the semester, last couple of chapters of the book of Kings. We're going to start with Josiah's reformation here, and we are moving from Josiah's birth and the beginning of his reign and the finding of the book to the actual implementation of the Reformation today. And then next class we'll deal with the end of Judah. As you can see, it's a very steep decline from Josiah's reform to the very end. That is in a way prophesied by Huldah at the end of 2 Kings 22. But you can also see this fracture in the midst of chapter 23 that constitutes the reason that many biblical scholars have suggested, starting with Frank Moore Cross, that there is a double redaction or two versions of the Deuteronomistic history. One version that was constructed to justify and build up to Josiah's reform, and then the second version that was constructed really after, and by editing the first version after the fall of Josiah and after his death to Pharaoh Necho, but really after the fall of the kingdom, which happened shortly after that. So the reason that Josiah dies is a bit vague here. There's more information in 2 Chronicles about this event, but 2 Chronicles is perhaps it's a good source in some ways, perhaps it's not. It is certainly later than the Book of Kings, so we're not sure exactly what to do with that information. And it sounds an awful lot like what happened to Ahaz. To Ahab, I'm sorry, with the chariot. Anyway, it's a strange story in 2 Chronicles, and I don't have any reason to believe that's more reliable here than Kings. So in any event, Pharaoh Necho kills Josiah, and there's a squabble between the different factions that support either Egypt or the Babylonian Empire, and that kind of wavering between those two opinions leads to the fall of Jerusalem. You remember from the book of Jeremiah that Jeremiah is part of the faction that supports the Babylonians, right? Remember, Jeremiah carries the yoke and says, hey, we're supposed to be yoked to the Babylonians. That's what Yahweh wants. So following the Babylonians is sort of a best case scenario, or I guess it's making the best of the worst case scenario or something for the Deuteronomists. They don't want to be yoked to anyone, but they'd rather be yoked to Babylon than to be crushed by Babylon. But in any event, what we're reading about now is this moment of kind of bright future, a very optimistic text that pivots in verse 25 of chapter 23 towards like collapse. But in any event, so we're going to read verses 1 through 10 together, and this is, again, coming in the wake of the finding of that book, which many biblical scholars imagine has something to do with Deuteronomy 12 through 26. It's the kind of law part of Deuteronomy. And if you look at Deuteronomy chapter 12, you'll see that a lot of that stuff gets done here. The ritual centralization on Jerusalem and so on. And there's a lot of reference here to the actual book and to the book of the covenant and to remaking the covenant, redoing the covenant. That would suggest that the Deuteronomistic impulse is fully at work here in Josiah's Reformation. So we'll start up at verse 1. Vayishlach HaMelech. And there's a athnach there. It's kind of an early, strange athnach, but it's a short verse altogether. And he sent the king. This is, subject follows the verb. So here's our vayiktol. This is just a call vayiktol. We have a hirek underneath our yod, and we don't have the nifal triangle, right? So we're good with call. And the king sent. And then Bayasfu elav. And here's the Zakif Katon, so I'll stop there. This is an interesting one. So Vaya Asfu, Asaf means to gather or be gathered. That is a first aleph verb, so this looks like it might be a hifl, but the aleph will influence the vowel underneath the yod. But also, it's a plural verb, and it's often treated in translation as if this is a passive. So this verb often appears when it's a plural in the nifal. They were gathered, but that would be vaye asfu. That would have an I-class vowel underneath the performative. So this, it might be a mistake. So vaya as, this could be just a call singular, and he gathered them, but since this is elav to him, so they were gathered to him. I mean, if I were to like be in charge of pointing this, I would point this as a nifl here. Vayeasfu. But in any event, they gathered to him, or they were gathered to him. Kol zikne Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. All the elders, the zakein, the old ones, right? This is a substantive adjective here in the plural. It's plural in construct. So zakenim, the im falls off, right? When we put in construct, you take off the mem and you keep your yod. Zikne Yehuda, the elders of Judah, and Jerusalem, and Jerusalem. So here's our verse 23. So you're gathering together all of the major players here. I'm going to enlarge the font here. Okay. Vaya'al hamelech Beit Yehuda v'chol ish Yehuda v'chol yoshvei Yerushalayim ito v'ha-kohanim v'ha-navi'im. And here's a Zakif Katon, so I'll stop there. And he went up. This is from Allah, third hey. When you have a Vayik tol form, the third hey will disappear. It's called a pakapation of the hey. So, and he went up. This is a class vowel underneath your performative, a patak. You'd expect that this would be a hirek for a call, but again, this is a first guttural, a first aleph. It's going to force its little a class vowel onto the performative. So the king went up, Beit Yehuda, the house of the Lord words, house of Yahweh. There's no preposition here. You might say Baveit Yahweh or El Beit Yahweh, to the house of the Lord, or in the house of the Lord. But instead, this is a adverbial accusative here. You can just kind of throw your preposition on as you see fit. So, and he went up to the house of the Lord, and all, or kol can mean all, or it can mean every, or each. Ish, person, or man, in gendered language, man, but I think it's pointing out the people here. Each person of Judah and every inhabitant of Jerusalem. That's why I say Ish should be translated inclusively there. Ito, with him. Remember, Aleph Tav is the direct mark of the direct object, the definite direct object, and when you have it with an O, a holum over the aleph, and then an object suffix, that's a direct object, so that would just be him. But when it has an I class vowel underneath it, it's E, with, ito, with him. So the king went up to the house of the Lord, and all of the people of Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Again, Jerusalem and Judah are kind of being picked out as somewhat separate here, right? Which they do function somewhat independently in some ways, and even with interests pitted against each other, as Micah well knows. And then and the priests and the prophets. V'kol ha'am lemi katon, like Zakif Katon, v'ad gadol. Athnak there, so we'll stop. And all the people from, here we have two prepositions next to each other. This is the Lamed here is explaining all the people. All the people, that is, from small and unto great. So this is a Hebrew idiom for saying everybody, from the small to the great. Like saying, A to Z, right? Everyone, from the smallest to the biggest, everyone came. Vayikra bo'oznehem et kol divrei sefer ha-barit. And here's Zakif Katon. So, and he cried out, or he read aloud. Kara can often mean to call out. It can also mean to read in public. The one word for the Bible in Hebrew is mikra, the stuff you read. So anyway, and he read aloud in their ears, in the ears of them, which can mean like in their hearing, right? In the earshot. All the words of the sefer, the document, the scroll. We translate it as book, but of course they didn't have book technology, right? They had scrolls back then. So all the words of the scroll of the covenant, habarit. And then Nimtza bevet Yahweh. The one that was found. Here's our nifal participle. We have matzah, that's our root, right? Our root, which means to find. We have a ha on here, which is here functioning as a definite article, and we have a noon stuck on. So this is our nifal participle form. How do I know it's a nifal participle and not a nifal active verb, a finite verb? It's a nifal participle, not a nifal perfect, because it has this long A-class vowel. If it had a short A-class vowel there, it would be a nifal perfect. Nifal participle has the long A-class vowel underneath the second radical. And then bevet Yahweh, in the house of the Lord. So the one that had been found in the book of in the house of the Lord. This is, of course, referring to the finding of the law in chapter 22 that we translated last time. Vaya amod hamelech al ha-amud vayikrot et ha-barit lifnei Yahweh laleket ahar Yahweh. V'lishmor mitzvotav v'et edotav v'et v'et chukotav b'chol lev u'v'chol nefesh. So I have ketone, so I'll stop there. Remember, these are coals, right? Coal. It looks like kal. This looks like a long A-class vowel. Our comments, but instead, of course, it's a kametz chatuf. It's a closed syllable, and it's unaccented because it has this makef, which puts all the stress onto the next word. It's an unaccented, unstressed thing then. So closed, unaccented, it's going to be a short vowel. Remember rules about vowels and vowel length, and so it's going to be a kol. Every single time you see this, it's going to be kol. It will most of the time look like kal. Sorry, one of our few comments, chatufs. Oh, okay. So and he stood. Remember, amad, to stand up. The king, so our subject comes after the verb, and the king stood. This looks like a hifl. It's got our patak underneath our performative, but it's a first guttural. So this is just our call. This is a call, vayiktol, and the king stood upon ha-amud, upon the pillar. Or maybe next to, like al can mean upon, next to, sometimes facing the pillar. And he cut the covenant. So remember, when we talk about covenants, there's an idiom in ancient Hebrew, which is you cut covenants. This might have to do something with like sacrificial rites. Remember Genesis 15, when Abram makes a covenant with God, there's like a cutting of animals, and so Abram watches as God, symbolic elements that represent God, go through the animal carcasses and so on. This might be behind that. We don't know exactly why it says cut a covenant, but that's what it is. And so he cut a covenant, lifnei, before Yahweh, before God. And here's what the substance of the covenant is, right? To walk. This is from halach, first yod verbs, and halak acts like a first yod verb for some reason. It had actually, because it historically actually was a first vav at least. But in any event, this halak, whenever you see it in infinitival form, it'll have this extra tav on the end. This is true of all first yod verbs when you see them in the infinitive. And I know it's an infinitive because it has a lamed stuck on the front of it, a preposition, so it's going to make it an infinitive construct. But when you see first yod verbs, like yashav means to sit or to dwell, right? We just saw that above, Yoshvei Yerushalayim, the inhabitants of Jerusalem. When you see that, it would be shevet. That would be the one, like to live or to dwell. So you're always going to get this tav stuck onto the end of first yod verbs, and you're always going to lose the yod when they're put into infinitival form. So lalechet. So to go after ahar Yahweh, to go after Yahweh, to walk after Yahweh. This is, the metaphor of walking in the way of Yahweh. So to walk after Yahweh, to kind of follow Yahweh's steps, as it were, metaphorically. And to watch or keep, right? To watch over, to keep the commandments of him. Mitzvot. Remember, tzava is commandment. Mitzvot. I know this looks like mitzvot, but in this verb, the root tzava, tzade, vav, and then third hey, which disappears here when you put it in construct. The tsava is always going to have a spoken vav and then a consonantal vav that you enunciate as a v sound. So mitzvotav, the commandments of him. This is a plural noun built off that verb tsava. And this comes from the root ud, which also is related to adah, and kind of like a counsel, or here it would be like a testimony, like a witness, a decree maybe. So all his laws and his testimonies, his decrees, and the statutes of him. A chuk is a statute, a chok. So these are some ancient divisions that we don't really understand exactly the difference between, but a law, a testimony, a statute. But in any event, all this legal stuff, that basically is Deuteronomy. And all the heart with all heart and with all self, or nefesh. Your nefesh, you're often translated as soul, but really it's like your breath. Really means your throat, a place of respiration, your whole self. Of course, this sounds a little bit like Deuteronomy, right? So to walk after Yahweh and to keep all these commandments and rules and statutes with all of your mind. Really, remember, heart is kind of where they thought your mind was. Some emotion, but mostly cognition, thinking, and all of your self. This sounds a lot like Deuteronomy 6, right? The Shema. Love Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and so on. And love there being primarily about like a devotion and living up to the covenant. Le hakim et divrei habarit hazot, to stand up. This is if you see ever a kof yod mem, you're probably looking at something that involves a kum, the middle weak root kum, to stand up. So this is a hiffle infinitive. Remember ha, the hiffle infinitive and the hiffle imperative start with this ha. So here's our ha added to a kum with a lamed stuck onto it, our preposition. So preposition plus verb. We're looking at an infinitive construct, and the ha stuck onto kum, the root that you know. That's to make stand up the words of the covenant, this. Here's our demonstrative, functioning as an adjective, an attributive adjective. It agrees indefiniteness, and it comes after. So this covenant. So to make stand up all the words of this covenant. So to make stand up, probably means to uphold, right? To uphold your end of the contract of the deal. That's what a covenant is, right? Is a contract. We talked before about how it is unique in the ancient world, as far as I know, that Israel imagined its relationship with God contractually. That is, to me, there's a remarkable kind of democratic element to that the whole people have to assemble, everyone, not just landholders or the elite or just the king or just the high priest. It's all the people that have to come here, just like in Deuteronomy and in Exodus, and they have to respond and answer and make a covenant, a covenantal deal. Same thing in Joshua 24. It should strike you and me as interesting that we don't see this happen much in the book of Kings besides this, right? Before this. When are all of the people assembled and they have to respond covenantally? There are a couple of times when people assemble, like, for example, Solomon's inauguration of the temple in Jerusalem, but it's a bit different. So this looks a lot like what Joshua does in Joshua 24. This looks a lot like Moses in Deuteronomy. This looks a lot like Moses in Exodus. Those are the times when all of the people are assembled and they have to make a response. So interesting historically to think about what does this mean? When did this happen? And so on. But in any event, this covenant, the covenantal relationship with God was not always the primary way that ancient Israelites understood their relationship to God. It seems to be part of this Yahweh alone, this Deuteronomistic movement. Other ways of dealing with Yahweh, as perhaps even part of the sun cult that you see in chapter 23 here, a lot of scholars think that Molech Molech just means king, right? It comes from Malach. We don't know about another deity named Molech. This might be King Yahweh, like a manifestation of Yahweh, a way that Yahweh was worshipped in ancient Israel, where you had to burn your kids or something, or perhaps symbolically pass your kids over the fire, whatever, however that worked. But Molech liked human flesh in some way, symbolically or real. This is maybe a manifestation of Yahweh. That is, you can make idols out of Yahweh, right? We've seen that many times throughout the Bible. But this is one form of Yahwistic worship, this kind of devotion, this unique covenantal bilateral agreement where you have some say in it, and you also can hold Yahweh to Yahweh's end of the game. There's a lot of stuff. There's negative stuff about the Judaistic way of seeing it can lead to violence, which it does at the end of this story of Josiah, who murders a lot of priests, apparently, in verse 20 of chapter 23. So there's really negative consequences of it. At the same time, this is the only place in the ancient world that I can see this idea of a polity, a people being treated as a people. That the idea that a God wants to relate to a people as a people without an intermediary of a king or a priest or etc. And it's also the only place where I can see that people can kind of hold a God to a contract. Anyway, some really radical thinking here, but also you can imagine that there were some ancient Israelites who thought this stuff was too radical and really out of bounds. This might have looked like a great innovation at the time, right? So, in any event, imagine how people would have reacted to Martin Luther, who were like, Luther's not going back to the old ways. Luther's making like everything new and different. So, this is just to try to contextualize some of this reform, understood to be a renovation of the past, but also in the context would have seemed like radically new ideas. So, Katuvim. Al hasefer hazeh. So the things that are written. This is a call passive participle. Ketuvim. This is part of like the acronym for the Bible. The Ketuvim, the written things. So Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Tanakh. Torah being the Torah, the Nevi'im being the prophets, and the Ketuvim being the written things. Everything that's written. It's a passive participle. That which is written, or those things which are written. It's got the U vowel, the kibbutz here. Sometimes the shurek in the middle between the second and third radicals. That's a sign of the call passive or some kind of passive. There's other ways to do passive participles and verbs in Hebrew, but when you see a U vowel shoved in the middle of your root, you're probably looking at a passive. So the things that are written upon the scroll, the things that are written upon the scroll. All that stuff, the covenant. So whatever he's reading from has got all the covenantal stuff. It's got statutes, it's got witnesses, it's got ordinances, and it's got stuff about how you should love God with all of your heart and your soul. That's why we say this is Deuteronomy, right? He's not reading Exodus. Exodus has statutes and covenants and all that stuff, but it doesn't have quite the same level of centralization of worship. Just look at Exodus chapter 20. It'll tell you, hey, you can make an altar wherever you want to. That is not what we see here, but also the stuff about the loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. That is found in Deuteronomy. The devotion to God is found in Exodus, but it's not quite the same terminology. So Vaya Amod Kol Ha'am Ba'barit, and it stood. Right. This is just a call. Again, looks kind of like a hiffle here, but we have a first aleph. First aleph is going to force its vowel that it wants, an in-class vowel, onto the performative. So, and it stood, all the people in covenant. So this is the people being treated as a singular, like it stood, right? And the people stood in the covenant, right? They agreed, right? They stood up and took their place in the covenant. Vayetzav Hamelech et Hilkiyahu HaKohen HaGadol ve'et Kohnei HaMishneh ve'et Shomrei Hasaf. I'll stop there. I'll go to the Zakei Keton. Lahotzi Mehechal Yahweh. So, and he commanded, this is tzava, that same verb, the same root, that, Yahweh's mitzvot, the commandments. So here's vayetzav, like, and he commanded, the king. So here's the subject. The king commanded. Hilkiah, the priest, the great one. So the high priest, HaKohen HaGadol, that's how you say the high priest in Hebrew. So Hilkiah, the high priest, and the priests of the second. We don't really know what this means. Second level, second tier, second part of the city. The second. We don't know. And the ones that keep, here's shomrim, but it's in construct. So shom, instead of shomrim, we take away the mem. Our yod ends now, the word. So shomrim, this is a participle, called participle in construct to hasaf. So the threshold. The ones who keep the threshold. The doorkeepers. So the king commanded Hilkiah, the high priests, and the second priests, maybe, I don't know, the second tier priests or something like that, the ones that aren't part of the high priest family, and the ones that keep the doorkeepers, to make go out. This is a hifel of Yatzah. This often occurs like in the recollections of the Exodus story, Yahweh made come out. So Yatzah, so this here's, when you have a first yod, in the hifel construct, infinitive construct, you're going to have the ho beginning. So le hotzi, to make go out or to bring out from the house or the temple, the palace really of Yahweh. This word hechal means palace. It's borrowed from, I think, Akkadian. Is it? It's a loan word from somewhere else. Is it Hittite maybe? In any event, it's a loan word, Bronze Age loan word that and made its way into Hebrew, and it meant to palace, but ends up meaning kind of the technical term temple. But it's, Yahweh has a palace, that's the temple, and David has a palace. So it's the temple was the king's palace. The temple was the God's palace, and the royal palace was the king's palace, and those were understood to be kind of similar or analogous to one another. So anyway, from the palace of Yahweh, the temple of Yahweh. Et kol hakelim asuyim. This is a complicated one. Lebaal v'la shera. I'll stop there with the Zakif Katon. All the vessels, the ones that were made. So here's the ha, and then asuyim. This is a weird form, but it's a form created off of the root asa, to make or do, and it's passive. Here's our passive participle, our shurek that's internal right after our second root. Our third root letter is gone because it's a third hey, and we've added an ending, and it should be im, except you can't have the two vowels in a row, so it screws it up and makes it asuyim. Sounds like a dual almost, but in any event, this is the call passive participle, masculine plural form for asa, to make. So it's the things that are made, the constructed things, to Baal and to Asherah. Ulachol tzava ha-shamayim. I'll stop there for the Athnak. And for all the host, remember the armies, right? The host of the heavens. So like all of the gods that were understood to be symbolized or represented or perhaps incarnated in, like existing in the celestial bodies, like Sin, the moon god, etc. Or Shamash, the sun god. Vayisrafim michutz Yerushalayim b'shad mot kidron. Stop there for Zakif Keton. And he burned. This is from saraf, like seraphim, right? But the verb just means to, in a verbal form, just means to burn. Yisraf, it's had a object suffix added to it, so it's reduced the vowels there a bit. But here's our just call, third masculine plural, vayikol form. Vayisrafim, and this is our ending, our object suffix, third masculine plural object suffix. And he burned them from outside. And michutz in Hebrew just means like, he burned them outside to Jerusalem. So he took them out of Jerusalem and burned them in the fields. A sada is a field, but also sometimes it shows up in this somewhat strange form, sadema. And here's the plural, sademot, the fields of Kidron. So remember the Wadi Kidron. This is a place that other people have taken things and burned them and thrown them that were idolatrous. It's kind of a little garbage dump here outside of Jerusalem. Vanasa et Va'afaram Beit El, and carried, this is just a call, perfect, third masculine singular, and carried the dust of them, or their ashes, Bethelwards, or to Bethel. Right? Here's again just the Beit El showing up without any preposition, but understood to be kind of towards Bethel. So he carried their ashes to Bethel. Why in the world is he going to Bethel with ashes, right? V'hishbit et ha-kamarim asher natanu malkei Yehuda. And he deposed or pushed down, made to stop. So Shabbat, like Shabbat, like the seventh day of the week, right? The day of rest. Shabbat, it's the day of ceasing. That's why it's called Shabbat. You stop, you cease. So this is that root Shabbat, but it's hishbit. This is a hifl. Here's our hih, beginning of the hifl. Here's our infix hirak yod. This is just our root Shabbat. So he made to stop, caused to stop. This can be translated as like depose. He forced the priest to stop being priest. So deposed, defrocked, whatever. And he deposed, or he fired. Ha-kamarim, this is an interesting word, komer, which is like a secondary word that means priests. And it'd be interesting to go check it out when this gets used. I mean, the priest of Baal or something, right? There's some, maybe when you don't want to use Kohen, right, to refer to these folks. The priest, which had ordained, and so we the subject is coming next, right? But this is a Natan. This is just a call perfect, third person plural. So, which they had set, Malkei Yehuda, the kings of Judah, had put, given. This is a technical term like to ordain someone, Natan, right? You set them, you put them. Sim can also be used this way. You set someone in a position of authority. You give them, you put them. So, in any event, and he stopped the ordination of all of the, de-ordained all of the priests which the kings of Judah had ordained. Vayakater babamot ba'ore Yehuda. So, are. He made smoke, caused to smoke. This is a PL, right? Here's our schwa underneath the performative. Here's our doubling in the middle radical. Qatar means to smoke. In the PL, to make smoke. And he caused to smoke, or, that's I guess more of a hifl translation, but yeah, he made smoke on the high places in the cities of Judah. So this is referring back to the kings of Judah had ordained, and which they had, made smoke on the high places of Judah. So that's, sort of understood to be like the way that they were offering, I guess, incense sacrifices or something like that. U Masibe Yerushalayim, and from all around. This is from Savav, which is Savav means to go around. Masibe, this is just a noun, mame stuck onto the front of Savav. The ones that go around Jerusalem. Apparently these bamot, these high places. There's hills that surround Jerusalem, and it makes sense that people would have altars on those high places in the ancient world. High places are kind of understood to be closer to God, and if you have a really important city, you'd want to surround it with places that the gods were offered incense on, so that the gods were present, so the gods would take care of the city, so that they would care about the city, right? It makes all sense in terms of ancient sacrificial logic. But of course, Josiah is breaking all this stuff down. Now, remember with Hezekiah's revolt, Hezekiah, like the Rav Shakah, is like, this guy's an atheist, right? Because he's tearing down all of the altars of Yahweh that have been up forever, right? So, in any event, it's possible to understand this as being kind of this strange, like, offense to Yahweh and so on, that this is being defended here. Va'et hamakatarim, same root, kater, lebaal, leshemesh, v'li yareach, v'la mazalot. I'll stop there with Zakif Katon. And the ones who burn incense, this is again a PL participle. We have a mame stuck on with a schwa underneath it. This is our marker of the PL participle. PL participle, doubling the middle radical here, noun ending. So the ones who make smoke to Baal, to Shamash or Shemesh, the sun, right? Shamash, the sun god, and to the moon, Yareach, like seen, basically, that moon god of the ancient Near East, and to the constellations. This comes from the root mazalot, the constellations, where, understood to be a kind of gods, right? Ulakol tzava ha-shemayim, and to all the host of heavens. So that's who they were worshiping there, right? It's more about the sun cult after we're done translating, but in verses 11 and so on. Really interesting to wonder what that is. So vayotze et ha Asherah mi Beit Adonai mi chutz l'Yerushalayim el Nahal Kidron. And he brought out, he made come out. This is a hiffle. This is really hard to know that this is a hiffle, sorry. But this is a hiffle of a first yod, say. So this is kind of like I said before, for a hiffle infinitive of a first yod, it would be ho. So here, same thing holds for a first yod verb in hiffle. It starts with this o vowel. I'm sorry, this is not an easy one, but in any event, he brought out, made come out, the Asherah from the house of Yahweh, from outside to Jerusalem, again, to the area outside Jerusalem, to the Wadi Kidron. Here it says Nahal River, right? But Nahal can also mean like this kind of a half river, right? It's in season sometimes and it's not in season sometimes. That's why like an ever flowing Nahal or whatever, that means like the Euphrates or the Jordan. It never stops. It's always flowing. But most of these Nahals, like Nahal Kidron, this is like a thing that when it rains a lot, it's got water in it. Most of the time it doesn't. So to the Wadi Kidron, or to the brook, the Kidron stream bed. This is just a place you could throw junk, right? Vayisrof ota b'nachal Kidron vayadek la'afar vayash lech et afara. And he burned ota, it, that is the Asherah pole, probably the Asherah tree thing, and he burned it in the Wadi Kidron, and he crushed it. This is dakak, that same verb that we came across in 1 Kings 19, the kind of still small voice or whatever, the crushed sound of nothing. But this is that same verb. So he crushed it to dust. There's the Zakek Katon. I kept reading past that, sorry. And he threw, this is the hiffle form. Here we have it's a strong root, and then we have underneath the performative a short A-class vowel. So it's a hiffle there. And he threw the dust of her, right? This is the mapik in the hay, which is showing us that this is a third feminine singular object suffix, referring to the Asherah pole or Asherah object. And the dust of it upon Kever B'nai Ha'am, upon the grave of the, of course, literally sons, but most of the time when B'nai shows up, it doesn't mean biological sons, it means a class, right? So upon the sons of the people, what this means is like the group, the people, understood to be the common people. Just like you just took it, you threw it on the graves of people. Why in the world would you throw the Asherah dust on the graves of people? Ha'am, the people. This might be worth checking into. What can Am mean? It doesn't mean bad people, right? It's not the wicked people or something like that. The ashes are used in several different ways in the ancient world, and sometimes, of course, being kind of negative. But like there's the ashes of human bones which are scattered around. But this is the ashes of an Asherah pole, which probably would have been wood, right? A tree. Are the ashes of trees this might be worth kind of just thinking about for a minute here. It's often taken to be kind of a desecration, but why throw it in the graves of people? I mean, the greatest people, why treat these people poorly if that's a negative thing? So in any event, just think about that for a minute. Vayatzof et batei ha-kadeshim. Kadeshim. So here's Zakev Keton, and he broke. This is from natatz, the root nun, tav tzade. The nun rolled up in a ball and jumped into your tav there, so that dagesh jumped in your nun. This is just a call vav consecutive. So, and he broke bate, like from bait, the houses of, it's in construct here, the houses of ha-kodeshim, the holy ones. This is again often this is that same word we saw before. This is often translated as like cult prostitutes. We have no evidence that that's what it means. Maybe it does mean that, but we got word that's literally pulled out of thin air, based on an ancient Greek playwright who was satirically talking about Syrians. So, yeah, your guess is as good as mine here. But this could be the bad priests or something, priests of Asherah or something like that, whatever it was. Asher bavayet Yahweh, which were in the house of Yahweh. Asher ha-nashim orgot sham batim la Asherah. So, which were in the house of the Lord, which the women were weaving. This is from arag, aleph, resh, gimel, which is the root that means to weave. This is a feminine participle, a call participle, active, feminine, plural. O, remember, ours are O, our holum over our first radical, recognizing that that's a call participle. And then our ot ending, our feminine plural ending. So, or goat, arag, to weave, or goat, the ones who are weaving. Sham, there. So wherever these kodeshim are hanging out, translated often as male temple prostitutes, wherever these people are hanging out, these holy ones are hanging out, that's also where, Sham, the women are weaving. Batim, the houses for Asherah. Maybe this is the things that adorn the house of Asherah, right? The women there were weaving for tapestries for her, or maybe this is like her tabernacle, right? Like the tent structure in which Yahweh dwelled. So, in any event, this is a place of mainly women weaving, and then this is why I say that I don't think that Kodeshim means brothel, male prostitutes here, because the women are. This is a place of weaving and constructing holy objects. I'm guessing this is also not like a bathhouse. So I don't know for certain any of these things, but I'm just saying neither do you and neither does anyone else. And so these texts have been used to harm an awful lot of people for a long time. And we need to be careful about how we translate them. So please don't state that this is all about male prostitution or something. Josiah is clearing out what he sees as idolatrous practices, which include these holy ones and some priests elsewhere, and women who are weaving things for Asherah, right? So, Vayave et kol ha-kohanim me are Yehuda. And he brought out, made come. This is a hiffle, consecutive. It's really difficult to tell middle week. Hiffles, vav consecutive apart from call vav consecutive. I just do it by context. And he came, all the priests. No, he made all the priests come, right, from all the cities of Judah, Vayatame et habamot asher kitru shama hakohanim, and he defiled. Made unclean, right? So this is a PL. Got our schwa underneath our performative, double middle radical. This is from Tama. This is, means to be unclean, to be bad sacrificially, to break in some way the rules about sacrifices and about basically piety. But so in any event, tama, to be unclean. And he made unclean, or he defiled, at habamot, the high places, which they burned, right? They made sacrifices, and then the subject of the priests, which the priests had sacrificed their word. Here's the directional hey, right? So their word. So you might translate this, and he defiled the high places where the priests had made their offerings, their sacrifices. And this is, made their sacrifices smoke, right? Where they had offered their sacrifices. Migva ad Be'er Sheva. Stop there. From Geva, this is a location, to Beersheba. Geva, kind of the north, Beersheba, the south. This is kind of the, A to Z kind of thing, everything in between. So, where the priests made their offerings from Geva to Beersheba. Vanatats et Bamot ha-sha'arim asher petach sha'ar Yehoshua Sar Ha'ir. And he broke down the Bamot, the high places, the gates, which were the entrance, or which were the open part of the gate of Joshua, the chief, the prince, the governor of the city. I have no idea who this is or what it means, but if you find anything else about this in particular, that'd be really interesting. One thing we do know is that we have some evidence that either in the time of Hezekiah or Josiah, that there were some cities in Judah that had altars, apparently, four-horned altars that were taken and deposited underneath latrines at the city gates. We don't know exactly what this means, but is this kind of evidence of that at the gates there were like entrance, like high places? Oftentimes, it makes sense they would be there, but they were turned into latrines and defiled. So all to say, some interesting archaeological stuff to work through about that. But Asher al Samol left Ish ba Sha'ar Ha'ir, which were upon the left, like the direction left, Samuel. This is strange with the O there, and of course the undotted shrek. This should be Samuel. But anyway, Ish, man, each, this is meaning kind of any person, which is on someone's left when at the gate of the city, when you're at the gate of the city. So this is just direction, so like kind of referring to where it is. Really interesting that this presumes that the city exists and so on. This is part of why some people would say, well, this might reflect a time before the destruction of Jerusalem, the first edition of the Judaistic history. A lot of those things, like, and it still's there today, whatever. A lot of those remarks in the Judaistic history presume that the city still stands and so on. Achlo ya'alu kohenei ha-bamot. But, nevertheless, they did not come up. This Ya'al, this is first aleph, third hey. Third hey disappears when you add the ending. The first aleph is going to influence the vowel to performer. This is just Allah to go up, and it's just they went up. Call imperfect, even though it looks like a hiffle here. But in any event, and nevertheless, they did not go up, the priests, to the high places. El Mizbeach Yahweh, B'Yerushalayim, to the altar of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. Ki'im, but rather, Ochlu matzvot batoch achehem. But rather, Ki'im, they ate, just to call perfect, matzot. I said matzvot, I think, when I read it, but yeah, that's but like mitzvah. But this is matzatz, the root, unleavened bread, matzah. But they ate unleavened bread in the midst of the brothers of them, in the midst of their not necessarily biological brothers, right? Their midst of their brethren, the other priests. They hung out with themselves. They ate unleavened bread and didn't come up to Jerusalem. Now, unleavened bread, like does this have to do with the Passover ritual that's described later on? But we can argue about that. Vatime et ha-tofet asher bagay b'nei chinam. And he defiled, again a PL perfect, and he defiled the Tophet. Really interesting to think about this, and what is this thing? That's a matter of debate. Which was in the valley from Gay, usually Gimel Yod Aleph. Here we've lost the Aleph, but this is like, every valley. Like from Isaiah 40, that's every valley. This is that word here, Gay. In the valley of Ben Hinnom, the son of Hinnom. So the Topheth was in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and this is something that he destroyed here. And then Gay Ben Hinnom, this is would just mean that there's no bait in one of the textual versions here, and this is the Ketiv Koresh. You would read aloud Gay Ben Hinnom. Labilti laha avir ish et bano va'et bito ba'esh la molech. Lavilti, except, so to accept, but this is all kind of works all together as a word, so that it wouldn't happen that, or except to make Passover. This is a hifel. We have a lamed stuck on. If you kind of look carefully, you'll notice the root here, avar, where ivrit comes from, Hebrew, right? But to pass over, to transgress. And you have a ha stuck on the front of it. So lamed plus ha, that's a hifel, infinitive construct. Avir, this comes from the root avar. Here's our hifel, our infixed here at Yod here. So here we have to make Passover. Ish, so lavilti, so that one does not make Passover at bino, his son, at bito, or his daughter, ba'esh, in the fire, la molech, to Molech. This is again, this question of who is Molech and what is Molech is another question altogether. But in any event, a god who likes to eat children, apparently, at least symbolically. Okay, so this is what Josiah is doing. Josiah is kind of cleaning house. The things that I didn't ask you to translate, it was just for time and space. But keep reading that. I mean, it's amazing what he does. There's apparently a whole cult to the sun. Is this like Yahweh, the sun god? Yahweh does things with the sun, makes the sun stand still in Joshua. I mean, Yahweh's associated with the sun a lot of the time. You read the Psalms, like, Yahweh sounds like the sun. It's Psalm 19, right? This kind of sun's going around the world and so on. So all to say, Yahweh is associated with the sun a lot. Is that understood to be kind of too symbolic, too representational? Is this maybe associated with Shemesh, the sun god? Yeah, so there's a lot of interesting things to think about here about what exactly is this sun dedication thing that gets burned in these chariots. And then there's some altars that get pulled down that are associated with Ahaz and Manasseh. And then there's a reference to King Solomon. And then there's the story about the altar at Bethel. And that whole story there is referring back to 1 Kings 13. That story of the priest that makes that proclamation that there's going to be somebody named Josiah one day who's going to come and tear down this altar. And he's going to burn some bad priest bones and put them on top of the altar, and then all that stuff happens there. And then the Passover gets celebrated, apparently as no one ever had celebrated it before. And then we get this immediate shift towards destruction. So this is, again, a kind of a whiplash chapter of like high highs and low lows, which suggests that maybe there was some two different versions of the text. All right, that's kind of long. Sorry that went on so long today, but I hope it's been at least somewhat interesting in the midst of all of this chaos that we're living in, to realize that some ancient people lived through some pretty serious chaos too, and tried to make sense of their world in times of crisis and chaos. Next time we're going to finish, so read chapters, the rest of chapter 23, 24, and 25, and we'll end with thinking about what the Book of Kings was as a whole.